Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be exploring the story of Kermit Gosnell,
Oh, yeah.
a doctor whose illegal late-term abortions and the shocking conditions at his clinic
Right.
landed him a life sentence. It's a story that's both complex and controversial.
Absolutely.
And you might be surprised by how seemingly successful this man's life started
Yeah.
before things took a very dark turn.
It's really quite a fascinating case. He was born in Philadelphia in 1991, attended really prestigious schools,
Oh, wow.
Central High School and Dickinson College, and even earned a medical degree from Thomas Jefferson University in 1966.
So, like, all the signs point to,
Right.
like, a very successful...
You would think with credentials like that,
Yeah.
that he'd be on the path to, a very celebrated career in medicine.
Exactly, yeah. And yet, as early as 1972, there were some signs that something was a little bit amiss.
Right.
This was around the time of the Mother's Day Massacre,
Yeah.
where Gosnell used a very dangerous and experimental device to perform televised abortions.
Yes.
And this resulted in a lot of complications for
Yeah.
the women involved,
Mm-hmm.
some even needing hysterectomies.
The device was this plastic ball with razor blades,
Oh my gosh.
meant to kind of cut up the fetus for removal, but instead it caused severe lacerations and bleeding.
Wow.
And so this event really foreshadowed the disregard for patient safety that would later define Gosnell's career. What's particularly interesting is that alongside these kind of disturbing medical practices,
Mhm.
Gosnell was also involved in community works. He was running a teen aid program and even a drug rehab clinic.
It's so interesting.
It creates this almost paradoxical image of the man.
It really does make you wonder how those two sides coexisted.
Right.
Was it a genuine desire to help people
Mm-hmm.
alongside this reckless ambition in his medical practice?
Right.
Or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface all along?
Yeah.
I mean, we may never know for sure, but it adds another layer of complexity
Right.
to an already very complicated story. But let's shift our focus to what ultimately brought Gosnell down.
Okay.
The Women's Medical Society Clinic in West Philadelphia.
Right.
This facility operated for over 3 decades,
Yeah.
seemingly under the radar despite numerous complaints and red flags.
And that's the truly shocking part. We're not talking about some hidden back alley operation here.
Right.
This was a known clinic,
Yeah,
and yet these regulatory bodies just seemed to turn a blind eye for years.
yeah.
And because of that lack of oversight, what was happening inside the clinic was allowed to escalate to a truly horrific level.
I can't wait to dive into that in the next part. So what was it that finally brought this clinic to the attention of the authorities?
Well, it all started in 2010 with a raid on the clinic. Initially, it was part of an investigation into illegal prescription drug use, but what they found
Oh, wow.
shocked even the most seasoned investigators.
I should imagine.
It was like something out of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Just imagine a place filled with filth and blood on the floors and this just pervasive stench of urine. That was Gosnell's clinic.
It's really hard to believe that a place like that could go unnoticed for so long.
I know. And to make matters worse, they saw an untrained staff, including teenagers,
Oh, gosh.
administering powerful drugs without any proper supervision.
Wow.
And perhaps most disturbingly, fetal remains were found stored haphazardly in bags, milk jugs, even cat food containers.
Oh, my.
These discoveries immediately raised questions about, the legality of what was going on and whether Gosnell was responsible for any deaths.
Yeah, let's talk about the legal ramifications then, because I think it's important for our listeners to understand how this case unfolded.
Absolutely. So in February of 2010, Gosnell's medical license was suspended, and in January 2011, he was arrested and charged with 8 counts of murder.
8 counts of murder.
Yeah. One of those charges, a third-degree murder charge, was related to the death of Karnamaya Mangar,
Okay.
a 41-year-old refugee who died during an abortion procedure at the clinic in 2009.
What can you tell us about that particular case?
Well, according to testimony, Mangar was given a lethal dose of anesthesia and painkillers by untrained staff.
Oh, wow.
Expert witnesses testified that the dosage was outrageous and that most average adults would have stopped breathing if given that amount.
Gosh.
The grand jury ultimately concluded that Mangar's death was a direct result of Gosnell and his staff's deliberate and dangerous conduct.
That's horrifying. And what about the other 7 murder charges? Those were related to babies, right?
Yes, those were first-degree murder charges, and they centered around the born alive rule,
Okay.
which played a crucial role in this case.
I see.
In the U.S., a baby born alive, even during an abortion procedure, is legally considered a person, meaning their killing can be prosecuted as murder.
So the prosecution was alleging that Gosnell killed babies after they were born alive.
Exactly. Several employees at the clinic testified that they witnessed hundreds of babies born alive during late-term abortions,
Hundreds.
who were then killed by Gosnell by severing their spinal cords with scissors.
Oh my gosh.
It's a chilling thought, and the staff even had a term for it. They called it snipping.
Wow.
They said it was standard procedure at the clinic.
It's hard to even fathom the level of cruelty involved. But I'm curious, with allegations of hundreds of babies, why were there only 7 first-degree murder charges related to infants?
That's a good question. The grand jury report indicated that hundreds of babies may have been killed this way, but due to poor record keeping and the possible destruction of evidence, charges could only be brought in a few specific cases.
Okay.
Where there was tangible evidence or eyewitness testimony.
Makes sense.
So ultimately, Gosnell was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder related to babies, 1 count of third-degree murder for the death of Karnamaya Mungar, and over 200 other lesser charges, including infanticide and racketeering.
Wow. So did the case go to trial with all of those charges?
It did, but the trial itself, which began in 2013, had its own share of twists and turns. For instance, 8 of Gosnell's employees, including his wife Pearl, pleaded guilty to various charges. Some even agreed to testify against Gosnell in exchange for lighter sentences.
It sounds like the prosecutor was building a pretty strong case against him with all of this insider testimony.
Yeah.
But you mentioned twists and turns. What else happened?
Well, during the trial, the judge actually dismissed 3 of the 7 first-degree murder charges related to the babies because of insufficient evidence.
Wow, that's a pretty significant setback for the prosecution. Did Gosnell end up testifying in his own defense?
He didn't, and surprisingly, his defense team decided not to call any witnesses at all.
Oh, wow.
It was a bold move, but ultimately it didn't pay off. The jury deliberated for 2 weeks and in the end found Gosnell guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, and over 200 other lesser charges.
So even with some of those charges being dropped, he was still convicted. What was his sentence?
Well, to avoid the death penalty, Gosnell struck a deal with prosecutors. He waived his right to appeal in exchange for 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Later, he received an additional 30 years for federal drug charges related to illegally distributing painkillers from his clinic.
It's a stunning end to a really disturbing story, but I think it's important to point out that the Gosnell case wasn't just about the horrific actions of one doctor. It really exposed some serious cracks in this system, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The grand jury report that followed Gosnell's arrest highlighted a systemic failure of oversight by Pennsylvania's Department of Health and the Board of Medicine. They had ignored repeated complaints and warning signs about Gosnell's clinic for years.
It's unsettling to think that all of this could have been prevented if the proper checks and balances had been in place.
I know.
The grand jury report stated that this wasn't about the abortion controversy itself, but rather a blatant disregard for the law and the health and safety of the women who went to his clinic.
Right. The report details unsanitary conditions, unqualified staff procedures performed with a callous disregard for patient well-being. It painted a very grim picture of what was happening at that clinic.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? Why should you care about the Kermit Gosnell case? This case, regardless of your personal stance on abortion, brings up crucial questions about the systems we rely on. It reminds us that we can't just assume everything is working as it should. We need to be vigilant, ask questions, and hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. While the case itself focused on the specific actions of Kermit Gosnell, it also sheds light on the broader complexities of healthcare regulations and the responsibilities of medical professionals. And in a way, Gosnell's horrific actions served as a wake-up call for lawmakers and regulators, leading to changes in abortion legislation and increased scrutiny of clinics in various states.
It's a tragic story, but I think it's one that we can learn from. By understanding what happened at that clinic, we can push for better oversight, demand accountability from our healthcare providers, and hopefully prevent something like this from ever happening again.
I agree. The Gosnell case is a stark reminder that even in a modern society, horrific things can happen when oversight fails and ethical boundaries are crossed. It's a reminder that we must remain vigilant and never stop demanding better for ourselves and our communities.
Well said. That's a powerful message to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Kermit Gosnell case. It's a heavy story, but an important one to know. Stay informed, stay engaged, and until next time, keep diving deeper. CAAE.